God of War originally came out in 2005, developed by Santa Monica Studio on the PlayStation 2. God of War and almost every major PS2 first-party series I've never really played at all. This is my first time actually going to the God of War games, and so I wanted to start with the original because the gameplay just looks more interesting. I know many people say, oh, skip to the PS4 one. Yeah, but this one looked more fun to play, so I'm going to start with the PS2 entries. Especially since for what I know about the more recent God of War titles, you don't really get the payoff for later stuff for those entries unless you play the earlier ones, which is why it sucks that there is no remaster or current modern port of God of War 1 and 2, so congratulations it is. That's how you want to play Sony. Our main premise that in ancient Greece, Ares is currently causing devastation to the city of Athena, with Kratos, who has been working for the Greek gods of Olympus for the past 10 years, being tasked to stop Ares. But stopping Ares isn't that simple, with Kratos needing the Pandora's box in order to actually defeat a god. So while the opening starts of the game is Kratos trying to do things once we gain to Athena or in Athena, the main bulk of the narrative is Kratos trying to attain Pandora's box in order to have the hopes of defeating Ares. Something I'm surprised right off the bat is the fact that a lot of the information that I currently know about Kratos' character is stuff that's actually piecemeal told throughout this game's narrative. Like, with the way it said people talk about God of War, it seemed more like it's going to be upfront with Kratos' whole story motivation, but no, that's something you interestingly find throughout the game, whether it be characters poking in his head or things that make Kratos flash back to how everything started. And I find that very interesting. They not only have a cold open moment, but then also don't even tell you all the information of our main character and what they are trying to do. All you know off the bat is what they are tasked with, and I feel that's a cool way of handling the narrative, and just makes me interested in seeing where things go with it. The biggest thing I'm surprised by is the fact that Kratos doesn't talk a whole lot, since he doesn't really have characters to bounce off with, so a lot of the time Kratos is just silent. Even when there's people who need help, he doesn't really say much because they generally get killed soon after right in front of him. So I find that interesting, the fact that Kratos doesn't have a whole lot to say unless he needs someone else to bounce off of him, or the attempts where he does try to help someone that is afraid of him, or one instance early on where he had the potential to save this one cowardly Spartan and instead just goes, I didn't come for you, and then just freaking leaves that person to their fate.
Thank you! Thank the gods you came back for me!
I didn't come back for you.
No!
You do have the other Greek gods in this game, but they mostly show up in order to give Kratos a power-up and don't exactly have much to say on the adventure, with instead Athena being the one who talks the most to Kratos, as well as his oracle, who also occasionally narrates cutscenes throughout the game about Kratos' life and everything. So those will be the main people talking within the narrative of the story. And despite the fact there's not a whole lot of chit-chat in the narrative, I do like the narrative of what they go for and showing these different aspects to Kratos, even just via his actions, where I mentioned how, oh, he left this one coward in order to die, or he got annoyed at this one person later on who refused to open a gate because they're too scared. Meanwhile, when he hears there's women in trouble and are basically trapped in what should be a safe location, he desperately wants to go get the key to save them and stuff like that. So just different aspects of Kratos get to see throughout the adventure just based on his actions just makes Kratos feel one more interesting main characters, and I do like what they do with Kratos in this game, especially towards the game's finale. Hell, even Ares, who doesn't have much screen time, even less screen time to really talk, I feel also ends up doing pretty well when it comes to characterizing him and everything for the game's finale and trying to highlight his own motivation motivations and what's going on and why he's attacking Athena, why Kratos does not like Ares, and aspects like that. Or NPCs in this game who are over here calling out, begging for help from the gods, meanwhile they don't know they're in this Pandora's tower that is a big booby trap location made by the gods. They're calling out to the people who made all these traps to hide away Pandora's box they now need. Now for the gameplay, with the main bulk of the game being a combo-based action game, with the fact that you have the Blades of Chaos and will make all sorts of combos on the enemies, or even grab them, whether it be grab when it's a prompt on them, or if you do a certain air combo, then you're able to grab them to continue the combo as well, and stuff like that. And you can also not only upgrade the Blades of Chaos, but also upgrades these magic spells you get throughout the entire game. Although you give me the option of, upgrade the spells that require magic to use, or upgrade my main weapons I'm going to be using the entire game, I'm going to pick the main weapons, and not just make them more powerful, it also adds more and more to Kratos' combo, so upgrading the Blades of Chaos, were my mode de facto, I am picking this option. Later on, you do also get another weapon you can use for combat, but even at full power, I just found the Blades of Chaos the better weapons to use, whether it be better for crowd control, or the fact that at full power for the Blades of Chaos were just a stronger weapon, so instead of having the other weapon, I might just have a spell on hand as well, in order to help with even more crowd control and stuff like that. This game does also have platforming and puzzles, and I'm surprised by just how much exploration in this game. Like, there are mandatory power-ups that you could easily walk past the backtrack in order to try and go and get, and stuff like that. So there is no slash when it comes to the whole entire puzzle exploration aspects. Granted, some of the platforming stuff could have used some work. I got the fact that Kratos off the bat had to double jump and stuff like that, and I do like the segments where he's on like a support beam trying to carefully go across and stuff. He needs a double jump to be more riskier thing to go faster and stuff like that. That's real good, but there are just some segments that platforming doesn't really feel all that enjoyable. Whether it be, hey, try and jump through these platforms, also can hit you and I down into the pit and you're dead, and stuff like that. Or this one later on that requires you to have the most precise platforming while climbing up this rotating tower, and it just knocks you all the way back down if you're even slightly off, which is easy to be, even looks like you should be able to make it. So there is aspects like that to the platform I'm like, could use some more work, but I'm just surprised just how much exploration there is when it comes to either getting upgrades and stuff like that, or just getting the mandatory tools you need in order to progress through the game. This game does feature quick time events, and for the most part, they're fine. My only issue is during the final boss fight, where the game will ask you to mash a circle button, but then right after will then say, push this button, and if just here to ask you to mash a button, that can be immediately ready to switch to a different button, so it catch you off guard. I feel like, specifically during the final boss, ironically, is where the QTEs weren't the best implemented, because when the game wants you to mash a button, it wants you to mash the button fast, like every time. So then to then swiftly change what button you want the player to be pressing next, I feel like wasn't the best implementation for final boss section when it comes to QTEs. While I do enjoy the enemies you come across, I do enjoy the fact that in order to also shake things up, they also add different kind of stakes and stuff to the locales you're fighting them in, whether it be there's booby traps to avoid and stuff like that, or there's one segment to very quickly defeat enemies before it's too late, and stuff like that. So on top of the enemy variety, the locales themselves also add their own variety to the combat, preventing it from getting stale, even if at a certain point, it's gonna feel like you're fought the same Minotaur as enemies over and over and over, but they do make good use of the environments they have in the game in order to help keep things fresh with the adventure. This game uses the right stick to dodge, or depending on whatever direction you play it at, that's where Kratos will use his dodge. And my issue isn't the fact that you lack camera control, my issue is with the fact that it's sometimes the enemies being big can block the camera. Like the dimensional enemies I mentioned earlier can sometimes block where Kratos is standing, making it harder to see. So the fixed camera angles and stuff do work for the most part. It's just in some instances where sometimes the enemy will be in front of the camera and it makes it harder to see what Kratos is doing in a situation. And there's sometimes where your role can have Kratos suddenly either not roll off a cliff, or he just rolls off the entire cliff. Like, for the most part, it'll leave him at least dangling off the cliff so he can climb back up, but there was an instance in the game's finale where Kratos ended up completely rolling off the cliff to his demise. There is also one other critique I have, which is, during the game's final boss fight, I mean the actual last phase final boss fight, I get for story reasons when it has a segment where your gameplay controls are completely switched up for something else. And I get for story-wise, you're going for. Gameplay-wise, it annoys the hell out of me when a game suddenly just throws out all of its gameplay and just switches to something else for its final moments. And I get it, it's for the narrative, it works for the narrative, but it irks me that everything I've learned the entire game just immediately got tossed out for this final segment. It's not like one of those segments that's like a victory lap where it's just more of a, we're doing this a cool moment. No, it's still an actual fight and everything to win. So it's one of those things where it's like, there are other games that do that, and I do not like it when a game just throws out all of its mechanics and just instead goes, we're not doing this now because the story dictates it. There are also some segments when a game will just throw a bunch of enemies to fight, and I kept thinking, am I doing something wrong here? What's going on? Only to find out, no, I was doing it right. It was just an absurd number of enemies were attacking me, and now the game is progressing. I mentioned that because there's one segment where I thought I could just kill off all the enemies, but then during the segment, Kratos monologued out loud how, hey player, you're doing something wrong, there's something you gotta do in the room. So I kept thinking with the entire game, if there's any point where there's a massive wave of enemies, that must mean doing something wrong. But no, every other instance, that was the correct thing. Just take out all the enemies, despite how many kept coming. There's only that one moment where I need to do a puzzle first in order to prevent the enemies from continuously spawning. And something like that, where it's like, okay, weird how this one side has a puzzle associated with it. Everything else is just, nope, we're just throwing many enemies. Nope, keep going. Nope, don't stop. Keep going, keep going. There you go, now I got a player. Now I'll mention the game's text, which is, there are no subtitles for the cutscenes at all. There's not even an option for it, just none whatsoever. And I find it weird because when there's regular chit-chat dialogue in the game, there is a text box that shows up everything in order to see what you're saying. And while the font is huge in everything, the font coloring and the background window coloring are too close identical, and I wish there was more separation so that way they had more contrast to make it easier to read. But like I said, that's also a very huge font, so it is easy to read, but I just wish the color was a bit different, and I wish the big fancy cutscenes had subtitle or the subtitle option to go with them as well. I also really like how they stylized the button prompts when it comes to QTEs or show up on screen. They could have made it the exact same button kind of looking presentation as a controller, but they try to stylize it a bit to make it fit more with the world of God of War and the kind of font they have. So I do appreciate that Hunter as detail of, hey, we're gonna make the QTEs presentation wise when it comes to showing the face buttons also look more akin to something that fits within the kind of setting we've already established here in God of War. Overall, I greatly enjoyed God of War. It was one of those things I'm just like, damn, I messed out not playing this when it came out in the PS2 days. Granted, no one of my friends would probably let me play God of War back then in the PS2, but damn, just stuff here that I'm like, really? We got this here? Like the fact that most of Kratos' moves are able to be block and dodge canceled, so you can go into a defensive position immediately and stuff like that. I'm like, there are action games nowadays that don't got that, and you're doing that in your first entry in this brand new IP, Santa Monica Studios. I love you, beautiful kind of sense. I was just blown away by that. So just so much good is in this game. And it's a shame that people just want to skip this and go straight to the PS4 title and everything. Because already just off this first entry, this is freaking great. And I'm more excited to get to God of War 2 and 3 and everything. So that's just Combat feels great, especially for our first entry. That's great. Platforming could use some work, but it does work for the most part. Puzzles are enjoyable to do, although I do wish there weren't moments where I'll be scratching my head going, where's the thing I'm looking for, to find out, oh, I missed it a bit back. And it's like also another cool thing. You can backtrack throughout the levels in order to actually get more goodies or get the key item you missed. Equator Practice is part of the game where they warn you that, hey, this is the point of no return for this section, so you want to go back at the stuff you missed, you should do this now. And that's a cool warning to also have in this game, especially since they were still putting more game after that. So, this first entry, just damn great and everything. So I gotta say about God of War, I'm not blown away. Alright then, good day.